Well, thanks everyone for coming. It's fantastic to see all of you here, many colleagues. I know how busy you are this time of the year, how busy we're all this time of the year. Students get less busy in a way. They have exams, but now we're getting very, very busy, making sure that all your marking is ready soon. So I think before we start, I know that some of you know already what SAAM is, but I think it would be good for you to have a look at a very short clip to describe what SAAM is. It's just only a couple of minutes. Well, you've seen their summary what SAAM is about, and we're here to celebrate the second year of this project, a project that started with the help of the Alumni Fund, and started as well thanks to one colleague who had already started a project and really inspired me to continue the line of the project that she started. That colleague is Cristina Alonso Punter, who's not with us at the moment, but she started this project on translation, and with that idea in mind, I thought I could do something similar with the subtitling. So I would like to thank her for that and to recognize that her brilliant idea was very, very fruitful. And we're celebrating the second year of SAAM, showcasing the work that our fantastic volunteers have done this year. And for this event, we have the pleasure and the opportunity of having two representatives of some of the organizations we work with. One is not on the video there because it's relatively recent organization. We started working with them, and it's Wyndham Heritage Museum. So we have the group visits manager with us, who's JB Brown, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that museum and the work they do there. I think if you haven't had the opportunity to visit that museum, I think it's something that you should do. I had the pleasure of visiting that museum and finding out so much information about Wyndham and presented in a really lovely and interesting way. So please welcome JB.
Hi, sorry, even with 4 legs, it takes me a while to get here. I'm JB and I'm from the Wyndham Heritage Museum in Wyndham. The museum itself is actually an old prison. It was the very first prison of its kind, built in 1785. It was the reason why it was the first prison of its kind and a model prison is because it was brought prisoners up from underground. Previously, they'd been kept in dungeons, all jumped in together. Wyndham decided to bring them up, give them separate cells, feed them. You'll remember from your history lessons, John Howard, who was a prison reformer, laid down some things that he thought prisons should do: keep prisoners occupied, give them something to work with. So they used that in the prisoners' cells. The prison was also had a chapel. It had a reading and writing room, which was very up to date in 1785, and they wanted to teach people how to read and write. Obviously, there was a few people, especially the male prisoners, who thought, why would I need to read and write? I'm a labourer, I work on a farm or whatever. But they did try. They also fed them 3 meals a day, which again was something that people weren't used to, bearing in mind that most of the people there were there because they were hungry. They'd stolen bread rolls or apples or something. But the conditions were still hard. You were in there from the age of about 7. And of course, there was a lot of young boys that were in these prisons, and they had hard labour. There were some gravel pits that were around about on the outskirts of Wyndham at the time, and they had to go along to the gravel pits, break up the stones and the rocks to form the gravel that was coming there. So it was hard work that they had to do. What else can I tell you about it? We have a dungeon there that is a mock-up of the actual dungeon that was held there, because the one that we have was actually a storeroom. And in there, we had some audio that as you went down into the dungeon, it started talking to you. Now, that was fine, but it meant that people who were deaf were unable to hear that. And also, if you needed it in another language, you didn't understand it. So we were very pleased when Carlos came along and said, look, we can help you with this. So that's where we've come into working with you to get, working with you to get new translations done, updating it, and to get in so that we can help people who are deaf and those that are blind as well. We also have other areas in the museum where we have the brush room. There was if you don't know, Wyndham was the brush capital of the world at one time in the last century. Britain Brush Factory, if not your mums and dads, your grandparents certainly had Britain brushes. And it always used to be said that Britain brushed the world. Because they did, they covered the world. But obviously once cheaper alternatives came in the 80s, Britain Brush Factory closed down. We have every brush they ever made in our museum. They gave us the machinery that was used to make it, and we have it set up in there. And so in there again, we had an audio that went off, and again, looking to have that done so that it can be in other languages and open to everybody to be able to hear it. The museum shows you the history of Wyndham. Wyndham has a 3,000-year history. The Romans had a small fort there on Moot Hill. There were, if you're interested, we change the displays every year. This year we've got the Lost Pubs of Wyndham. There were, in 1619, 33 pubs in Wyndham, with a population of about 2,000. So, and they all did business. I'm not sure quite how. But mind you, there was nothing else for people to do. Now there are 8 pubs in Wyndham, most of them going down the high street that's there. If you haven't been to Wyndham, please do come and have a look. There was a major fire in Wyndham in 1615, and virtually the whole of what you would term the high street has been rebuilt, from Bridewell Street, the marketplace, all the way down Market Street. Those are all new houses that were built from about 1620 to 1630. And they are still there, still in use, and we're very pleased to have 300-year-old Main Street, basically. It's a very interesting high street. There are shops all the way down there, and then obviously flats and what have you above. There's hotels, there's plenty of eating places, pubs, as I said. So come to Wyndham Heritage Museum. As students, you'll get in on a concession price. We have to charge because we are not supported by the local council. We rely on people coming through the door. We have about 100 volunteers who work at the museum. There is not one single person that takes any wages. We are all volunteers that are there, from the stewards, the chairman, all of the committee, the people who work in the tea room. All of us are volunteers, and we all give our time because we absolutely love Wyndham, we love its history, and we want to tell you its history. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. If you want to do a group visit, as Carlos said, I am the group visit manager. Just get in touch with me. You can do so on the website. Get in touch with me, and I'll organise a visit so that you can have a much bigger introduction to it. Yes?
I have a question. Is it true that there is a tunnel between the Abbey and the Green Dragon, so monks could visit the pub?
That is a rumour, yes. We do not know the answer because we haven't been able to get the money together to excavate it. That is put out there. We think, based on history and what we know about the Green Dragon and the monastery, we think the answer is no, but we do not know definitely. The myth continues, yes. Although we have found, I don't know if you know, was it last year or the year before when they found that body and what have you there, that was thought to be a monk that was buried under the, because at one time, obviously, before that extension was built to Beckett's Chapel, that was a monk's burial ground. So it is possible, but the myth continues. The monks were very good at making their own brews anyway, so they probably didn't need the tunnel. Has anybody else got any more questions they'd like to ask? No? Well, I am here whilst we're eating and so forth, so if anybody does want to have a chat, then that would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, JV. As she just said, I think it's worth a visit at museum, and soon we will have those clips with the subtitles that you have created as well, so very exciting. I have the pleasure as well to have a second visitor who's come a long way just for this event, crossing the ocean. And Amy Travis is an independent consultant for the Child Protection Toolkit. And I got in touch with her through Liz Wilson, who runs the project of SKIP. SKIP is a project where students go on a voluntary basis to work with children that teaching them in English. We had some students on the year abroad taking part in SKIP. So when Liz came over, she put me in touch with Amy, and Amy found out that we were doing this project, and she had these video clips that many of you have been subtitling, and we have the pleasure to have her with us today. So very welcome, Amy.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here. I'll give you a little history as well. It's usually good for placing everything. So about 16 years ago, in 2002, Save the Children UK, in conjunction with the UN Higher Commission of Refugees, did a report on Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. And that's when they learned that it's actually a huge problem, that there are children abused in situations where you would assume people are coming with the best of intentions. And so again, in 2008, Save the Children did another report and found the same thing happening in Haiti. Now, sadly, this doesn't sound it sounds familiar, right? 16 years later, we're still dealing with this. The news this year just broke again about how bad it is that we have Oxfam and Save the Children and CARE and all of these organizations that just don't seem to be able to vet themselves properly to make sure that they are actually helping the neediest people and making sure that they're protected. So that's a very sad start, but I think the hopeful thing is that there are things that we can do. And you guys are an integral part of that. My project could not function nearly without you, and you are providing a reach that it would never have, or not never, it would just take me another 10 years to get there. So I can't even express that enough. So you have these large organizations, but you have so many people with such kind hearts that go on their gap year or go and do volunteer service abroad, and they come back passionate about the people they met, and they start their own charities. And they're just themselves, just like this is just myself right at the moment. So funding isn't huge, and they don't always have the help and support they need in doing this. My story kind of begins like that. I did a volunteer year abroad, and I worked with an organization that was started by people who did a volunteer year abroad, and they just wanted to fund a group of kids that they knew in Liberia who needed schooling. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. Depending on how you rank it, it's in the bottom 5 in terms of poverty. And unfortunately, what they found is the group that was administering it was abusing the children. And when they fled the country, they came in and took over and felt, they finally stepped up and said, it's our responsibility to be vigilant and to figure out what's going on. So when I was hired, they said, hey, you're a teacher. Why don't you give a training on this? You can do that. And I said, sure. It ended up being my full-time job. And what I found when I was there was the local people who are the teachers who work with the students all the time, their needs were not being met from a Western perspective. You know, we came in with our idea of what it means to protect kids, and it just didn't jive with their needs. And so they kept telling me, this is what we need, this is what we need. We really want trainings. We really want the ability to understand what our rights are. We really want to be able to learn how to have that dialogue with this funding organization from overseas so that we can say, hey, these are African values. This is how it makes sense with this. Let's use this language together. Let's have a dialogue. And prior to that, they weren't able to. And as I was there, I heard this from other organizations who were having the same problem. And then after my year, I went to Kenya, and I heard the same thing from those organizations. And so I did a survey, and it was overwhelming. These small groups of people who were trying their best to help just wanted to have videos. They just wanted to have support networks and systems so that they could put this in place. So we're on phase 1 right now. And as you can see, the videos were very much, what is abuse? What are our rights? What does this mean? And so they can have the basis to talk, and you're giving the locals the basis to talk by having it translated into languages they can speak besides just English. So it's not coming from just overseas. It's coming from them in ways that they can now express themselves and think about it and now have a discussion and empowerment. And phase 2 down the line will be more of just moving from procedures to the other things they're asking for. They want to help understanding children with learning disabilities so that they don't have to punish them for not understanding, so they can figure out how to help them to learn better so that they're not less frustrated, the teachers are less frustrated. They want to know about classroom management. They want to know about how to help kids be more resilient, because they are coming from poverty, but that doesn't mean that they can't succeed. And there are so many positive, easy things that they can do and put in place so that they can really overcome the barriers that they have and really live very fruitful, very happy lives, and to leave the trauma of poverty, of starvation, of abuse behind. And like I said, you are making that happen, because I hear from organizations all the time, this is just what we need. This is exactly what's going to help us move forward. This is what the local African groups that I'm talking with, the local Thai groups that I'm talking with, the local groups in Peru that I'm talking with, this is exactly what they said we need to help ourselves out. And so I want to thank you so, so much for all your work. And I want you to know you're making a very positive difference in the lives of people who just need just a little bit of assistance in having these conversations. So thank you very, very much. And if you have questions or anything, I would be happy to answer them now or later. So.
Well, thanks very much, Amy. It's really lovely to hear all that you said and the impact that the work the volunteers are doing has. In the 2 years of life of SAAM, our volunteers have done a lot of work. We have subtitled 17 different video clips, which are worth about 4 hours worth of filming, which, you know, if we put that into filmic terms, it would be like 2 films subtitle if we put it all together. So I've got here a sample of, just a tiny little sample. Obviously, I'm not going to bore you with 4 hours of subtitling, but just only with 4 minutes or so.
Warwick Road School, the old Central Board School in the late 19th century. A girls' class with the mistress in her pinafore. Boy Scouts and their leaders with staves and bush hats by the Market Cross in 1910. Muscular Methodists, a church working party behind the church in Town Green. 5 uniformed staff at Wyndham Station in the early 20th century. Today the station is unmanned. More uniforms. Post boys with bicycles outside the post office in Market Street. A late 19th century policeman outside the Bridewell, which served as the police station for over 100 years until 1963. More uniforms and moustaches at the Fire Brigade station in 1905. The visit of Edward VII in 1909. Despite the bunting and decorations, the King drove straight through from Norwich to Kimberley Hall. Peace celebrations on the Fairland in 1919. The Congregational Church is in the background, and the Fairland Hall, once the British School, is on the left. Sports on the King's Head Meadow. Note the traditional hurdles and marquee. Wyndham Athletics Club held open events here from 1884 to 1909, which attracted many athletes. The removal of the sports to Ackerborough was very unpopular in the town. An early photograph of a fair on the Fairland.
Child maltreatment is all forms of physical and emotional ill-treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, and exploitation that results in actual or potential harm to the child's health, development, or dignity. Maltreatment is a general term which includes both abuse and exploitation. While there often is overlap between abuse and exploitation, abuse is the intentional harming or manipulation of a child by physical or verbal means or by the neglect of a child's well-being. Exploitation is the use of a child whereby one party profits through the exchange of money, power, or other commodity at the detriment to the mental, physical, or developmental health of the child. Examples of this are child labor, prostitution, trafficking, and child soldiers. Child maltreatment is frequently divided into 4 types of abuse and exploitation: physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. The first 3 types are acts of commission, meaning that the abuser performs an action that harms a child. One, however, neglect, is an act of omission, where the abuser harms a child by not providing for a child's needs and safety in order for the child to develop. Can you recognize an abuser? Many people assume they can. In reality, abusers are difficult to spot, and they don't fit the common loner, creepy male stereotype. Child abusers can be anyone, male or female, adult or child, single or married, charismatic or reclusive, heterosexual or homosexual. The common characteristic is that the vast majority of abusers are known to their victims, such as a relative, a teacher, a parent, a classmate, or a neighbor. One common misconception is that a person's sexual orientation is linked to sexual abuse. This isn't true. A person's sexual orientation does not necessarily correspond to his or her sexual preference when abusing a child. Heterosexuals may sexually abuse children of the same sex as themselves. Sexual abuse is never caused by uncontrollable lust or sexual arousal. While sexual desire may be strong, it's always controllable. Physical, sexual, and emotional abuse is about power and control of the victim. Abusers gain a feeling of domination and control from abusing.
Well, as you can see, this is only a tiny little sample, but you would appreciate that creating those subtitles is challenging for the students in terms of translation, but not only that as well. There's a lot of text, there's a lot of being said that needs to be condensed, that needs to be thought through really well to make sure that the audience can read that at a good reading speed as well. One of the achievements of SAAM this year was to obtain a recognition from the university. It's a recognition that I'm collecting there on behalf of all the volunteers and all the organizations we work with. But UEA recognized SAAM in one of the engagement awards as part of a project award for the outstanding contribution to public and community engagement. So I want to flag this, but to thank previous subtitlers and current, SAAM subtitlers as well for all the work you've done for SAAM. However, we need to move to the stars of the project, and this year's stars are here. Some of them here. Last year, our team was composed of 12 students, so this year we recruited for the project 16 students, and we have a representation of most of them here today. And we have one student who has kindly agreed to say a few words on behalf of all of them. Orla, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Orla. I'm one of the students who have been volunteering with the SAAM project. I'm sure we're all very happy and pleased and proud of the work we've produced for this project. I'd just like to say that it's been a really enriching and fulfilling experience, and it's been very rewarding producing these subtitled videos, especially given it's for such worthy charitable organisations. It's also given us a real insight into the audio-visual translation industry, and it's shown us that it does take a lot of work and a lot of experience to create such videos, and it's definitely sparked an interest in some of us that this could be something we want to look into further in the future and potentially think of it as a career. As Carlos was already saying, the translation part of it was very difficult at times. You have to first transcribe and then translate the script. I was working with Holly, and I know at first we did it into French, and you're really happy with the translation you've produced, but then once you've spotted and queued all these videos, you then realize you have to reduce it all down. And even though you've got these perfect translations, you then have to adapt it a bit to fit to the constraints of the subtitles. But then arguably that's also a very rewarding part of the experience, because you become very used to being flexible. You have to then find a real good solution that fits both the good translation and fit in the subtitle constraints. And when you have done that, it's a very rewarding feeling. It's really good. So yeah, I'd say that that's both one of the most difficult parts and one of the most rewarding parts as well. I think everyone else has already been explained. It's been a really good experience. Everyone's really happy they took part. And just to finish, I'd like to say a big thank you to Carlos for allowing us to be part of this project, and also for being very helpful, patient, especially with the technology side of it, because it has a mind of its own. I know we've all had big problems, but Carlos has always been there to help us and has never, hesitated to help us whenever needed. So thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ola. And I would like to thank all the volunteers for all the work you've done, all the time you've given generously to this project. So when you hear your names, I would like you to come here, because you're going to receive a little certificate to show all the appreciation that we have for you, as well as a little UEA token for you to take with you, okay? So we're gonna have Amy and JB handing out these certificates. Okay, so we have our first volunteer, Maria Agin Blasco. Toiba Blumstale. Ola Condra. Chris Dunavis. Soledad González. Alice Corrin. Holly Miller. Alicia Muñoz. Jasmine Gorman. Carol Walid Fati. And Maria Sinmensen. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's it. I hope I haven't missed anybody. No, good. Okay, well, I think we need to finish now. I just want to finish with thank you in many languages. I want to thank everyone who's been here helping to celebrate this, colleagues, volunteers, and students. I'd like to thank Amy and JB for giving us the generous time to be here with us. And in film terms, behind the scenes, we have lots of supporting roles to thank as well. So Matt North, he's been a huge help trying to bend those subtitles onto the clips. That's been a very challenging experience. And Danielle, who's not here with us, who was a volunteer last year, has been liaising with Matt about the bending of the subtitles. I also like to thank Jason Baldry, who's been dealing with our website as well. And last but not least, Katie and Alex in the office for helping us with all this. I mean, for example, this lovely certificate is the creation of Katie. So they're doing a lot of work for the project as well, although they are not in those photos there. I would like to thank, obviously, all the volunteers again. And I hope that this project will lead you to other experiences and will build that sense of achievement that you've created, you know, and that you've built, as well as, you know, the pride that you need to take with you with the help that you've given these organizations. These are for the finalists. You're taking that with you for second years. You're going abroad and you will be back. So once you're back, you're very welcome to rejoin SAAM. And I hope that this experience is a springboard for all of you for a future career, whether it's in subtitling or not, doesn't really matter. But the experience that you acquired, I think, can be applied to many other areas. And I hope you can continue helping in the future with subtitling or anything else. As Amy said, there are people who need help, and you've proved that. So I hope you carry on doing that. So thank you all, everybody, as well, for coming. Thank you.